So, today's hot topic is multi-generational leadership, right? And one of the reasons we brought this topic up is because it's become a buzzword. And what is a bit confusing or fascinating, whichever way you look at it, is that having multiple generations at work or in the home is nothing new. We've always had multiple generations at home or at work. But the dynamics seem to be changing, and people are suddenly asking for help in handling multiple generations. What was traditionally called the generational gap seems to be much wider and causing a lot more problems. How are you seeing this in parenting, and how do you see it evolving in parenting?
You're absolutely right. First of all, Supriya, this multi-generational setup at home has always been there. But what we see now is that parenting itself, the focus is shifted. Like in say when we were growing up, even generations before that, the focus was to raise obedient children. But now the focus is to raise capable, independent, free thinking, resilient. I mean, just the adjectives and the focus has widened so much. So, what do you do then? And plus, information was so freely, is now so freely available, which it wasn't. So, when my child asks me, Mama, can I go to the beach? I cannot say beach is closed just because I don't feel like going, because then my child can easily Google and find out that beach is never closed. So information is more available. Focus of parenting is changed from just raising obedient children to raising free, independent thinkers. And that kind of requires us to, you can say, change our approach in parenting. So that's the reason why now we have to kind of speak more and more about alignment and seeing each other's point of view, because it's moved from you do this because I tell you so to, now we're in it together. So how are we going to approach this? So that's the difference we are seeing in the parenting space.
Thank
Now, see, we always had multiple generations. We had the culture of joint family, so we always had that. Number two, I think every generation complained about the next generation. I think we have heard that also at home, at work. What has shifted now is what I feel is there is a shift in, if I can use a very strong word, shift in consciousness of the youngsters. I mean, I saw that shift in my son's generation, for example, when the son, nephew, nieces. But the younger, the Gen Zs, there is a difference. So I think they're not like us when we were kids for our parents and grandparents. That is number one. Number two, the sheer exposure that they're bombarded with, right? They are, I mean, they are playing with iPads and iPhones for sure. So their just access to information is tremendous. Then there is also peer pressure. I don't think we had so much peer pressure compared to the current generation. And last point, some of, this is something that I've been reflecting. Some experts, some of our favorites, like Simon Sinek says, Gen Z is very entitled, quote unquote, which I feel is very unfair to the generation, right? I mean, we were also entitled in our own way. Who are we to label them as entitled? So I think the sheer way of labeling some of this stuff, the English labeling, which was not so prevalent earlier, I think, right? It's a cumulative effect of all this, which has made it very, very difficult and challenging for everyone involved, including the youngsters, apart from the elders. Yeah.
There is a younger generation that is far more aware and has access to a lot more of information. And that therefore changes their relationship with the older generation. Like Prerna, you talked about the older days that we would have blind obedience.
I am of a strong opinion that leaders are better off if they have coaching as a predominant approach to leadership. They should have the other approaches also, including something like autocratic, and where you have to take lead and give the direction and execute, especially if there is an emergency, right? But unless the leaders are not able to embrace coaching as a predominant style, I don't think we can manage the young workforce. And command and control, I think, died with at least my generation, right? I feel there's at least two generations that have come into the workforce since I started. So command and control will not work. And this is, I mean, my entire small team are Gen Zs. So coaching approach works. The reason, one, it is partnering. I mean, I can't talk to a parent child like in a command control transaction analysis. Uh, they also should feel part of it, right? They're not just executing something. They also want to feel that there is something that they're contributing. And is there some shared purpose, right? I mean, we may be working with CXOs and touching their lives professionally, personally, but do they also feel a party to that in our team? So co-creating, purpose-driven for sure. And lastly, I think that generation is also more clear about potential, which was not even in my lingo when I started my career, right? So they know my potential is not just doing some random stuff at work at an entry level, and I'm cut out for something bigger, even if I don't know that, right? So some alignment with the larger potential and purpose is absolutely critical. So connecting with them at a adult to adult can happen very well if it is a coaching approach. I'm not even touching upon inspiring, taking actions, and all that. I mean, that all can come only later, provided this foundation is there. Yeah, so coaching has to be one of the primary approach to leadership if you have to manage a young workforce.
I
I
like the
like
way
the way
you
you
talked about
talked about
command and
command and
control
control
versus
versus
manage.
manage.
And you
And you
wrote
wrote
an article in LinkedIn recently, which was about quiet quitting, right? Where people who don't feel that they have purpose and meaning in their workspace quietly quit. And they may not physically quit, but there's a signing off. And at the same time, you talked about inclusiveness, that the younger generation needs to feel that their opinion matters. In fact, there's a story I tell very often when my son was in school, in Montessori school, and I tell this to CXO leaders, right, who are still a bit authoritative with their teams and don't ask for the team's opinion. There was a discipline issue, and the age group was 6 to 12. And the school teacher called this 6 to 12-year-olds and said, X is the problem. Now you figure out the rules and figure out how to solve the problem. And they had this little meeting, these 6 to 12-year-olds, and they sorted the problem. They figured out rules and they figured out what's the consequence if somebody doesn't follow the rule. This is 6 to 12-year-olds, and we do not give the same, people who graduated, got a master's degree, who we are paying a lot of money to. We don't respect their own opinion and their own ability to set down some rules and make a decision. But they recognize that they can. And I think that's one of the big differences. So, Prerna, coming to you, same question, right? You at Parenting Matters help people understand how to be a coach as a parent. Now, how does coaching as a parent show up?
When Subash was talking, it was almost like he is talking about a parent child relationship. Because in our family, it's the same dynamics, right? Do we share power? For generations, we have been using power over methods of discipline, of interaction. I'm older, I know more, you just follow. And now things are changing so much because science is showing us. Unfortunately, our grandparents, great grandparents were not privy to science and the latest research in neuroscience, which is showing that when there is fear, when there is control, when there is you know um, consequences, and punishments, the brain goes into that fight, flight, or freeze because the brain perceives this as a threat. Instead, if we could collaborate, discuss, share problems, and say what can we do together, so that's what I call power with. It's not power over, but you're sharing power with. And when you share power with, you're then going into the higher brain function, because now the brain of the child or family member is not feeling that they need to get defensive and prove themselves or push back, but they use the opportunity as an opportunity to brainstorm together and find a solution together. So the learning which happens when your brain is not deployed towards survival, but your brain is now deployed towards, yes, there's a problem, what can be done? And the thinking capacity is available. Just beautiful, solutions can emerge, just like what you said about these 6 to 12-year-olds in a Montessori. When they were posed with that problem and given that space, they were able to think about what to do, and come up with a solution which maybe an adult in the environment, the teacher would have not. So there is coaching required here because you're moving away from control to collaboration. Like
our entire education system is on us beating the next person, right? We have to score better, work well. And then we come into the workspace and everybody says, oh, you need to be collaborative. There's a lot of parents and leaders who are going to say, look, that is what makes this generation entitled. We're being permissive, right? And there are certain discipline that you need to have for success, and the beliefs that you talked about. Then they come to office and they attend these programs on collaboration and communication and how to be better leaders. Why is it? What do organizations need to do to recognize that this has to be a way of life? I can't be one kind of a parent and a different kind of a team leader, right? I have to be able to practice everything that I'm practicing, whether it is active listening, whether it is collaborative curiosity, whatever it is, I have to be able to do it all together as a way of life. So, your thoughts on this, Subash?
So, there is no shortcut. For example, as a leader or as a parent at home, it's not easy to navigate this. Number one. Number two, what we fail to understand as leaders and parents is that we have created that also. I liked what you said. We have also been we were not pampered as kids, men generally. At least I was not. So I think a lot of us as parents have pampered our children, right? And of course, they're born into a better quality of life for sure. Generally, right? That is so. A pampered childhood, not seen failures. Uh, they don't know failures today. They have not experienced failures, and then they come into the I had one of our common friends, Supriya. His son is in IIT. Suddenly he found, he's just one among the many. I mean, he was the best in the school, college. Suddenly he reaches IIT. I mean, he's just one of the many, just an average, right? That's a failure for that person, that kid who has not handled failures till then. So part of the problem is how we have created that in the initial phase at homes, and then we have to be just a little more patient in nurturing this talent also. Because there is no command and control, that freedom anyway that is taken away from us, we may have to kind of genuinely be empathetic, understand. You can't put ourselves into their shoes for sure. It's a very different world, but can we be empathetic about their world, their worldview, and then operate from that point of view? And I feel, I always say this, our generation evolved from whether an Annamaya Kosha to whatever Vijnanamaya Kosha and Anandamaya Kosha, or Maslow's hierarchy from a roti kapda makan to maybe self-actualization. But these kids can comfortably oscillate between both, the self-actualized state to, food and clothing and brand and gadgets, right? So to that extent, to balance it as leader at work or parent at home is something that's a challenge that we need to step back and look at it slightly differently. And then last point, there is this challenge of we don't have time, right? We don't have the luxury of time. We all are entrepreneurs sitting here, right? We don't have time. That is a reality also. But then there is no escape. So it's about finding that balance, and so that it is peace for us. Now, what I want to also convey through this is trying out these things is the best solution at home and at work. I mean, at least for that selfish motive, we should give it a try, so that there will be more peace at home for the larger home and larger team, for sure.
If I am a parent who goes and attends parenting programs and learns how to be more inclusive and respect my child's opinion, is that child different, a different team player and a different leader in the corporate world? Does it change the way they behave in the organizational setup? What is it? What is the change?
So, from the parents I've been communicating with, this way of bringing up your child does not show results in the immediate. But, like you said, in the corporate world, the main thing which being a sensitive and mindful parent brings is emotional intelligence for the child. Because, just like Subhash was saying, that being a parent who's mindful or collaborative doesn't mean that you're going to not now set the limits, doesn't mean that you're going to insulate your child from every failure. In fact, it's on the contrary. You let your child face the failure, but you hold their emotions and feelings. So, what I notice is children who are brought up in this way, where parents have been giving importance to emotions, have been holding the feelings. That doesn't mean it's like, like they say, failure is a stepping stone, but you have to still deal with all the emotions that failure brings. So, that awareness of feelings when it comes to the workplace, it really makes the person more empathetic, more mindful of and sensitive to the team they're working with. And it brings a different level of leadership skills because there's sensitivity, maturity, and empathy that comes into the workplace.
One of the things we're always having a conversation is we grew up being told, don't bring your emotions to work, right? But every human being at work is reacting from an emotion every time. And actually understanding how to deal with those emotions helps us build better relationships, right? Recognizing somebody else's emotion helps me to be less reactive, because then I know where they're coming from. And the three of us, I know, have had these conversations before, right? I know we are all in the same mind space. It seems like this just makes common sense, right? That we have to bring up our children to be leaders, and leadership doesn't begin after you graduate and you walk into the workspace. It starts with the way you are brought in. Okay, so I think I'm going to circle back to where we started, which is coaching as a mindset. Coaching, Subash, while you train people to be coaches, and Prerna, while you train parents on coaching, finally there is a mindset to be to bring in as a coach. What is that we need to bring in? Prerna, can we start with you? As a parent, what is that mindset that is different from being a kind and gentle parent?
The starting point would be to work on your own self and reflect on your own beliefs and question why do we do the things we do. Because somewhere in us, the being in control, it gives us some kind of safety, right? But is it really working? Is it out of our ego or our, wanting to control that we're doing something? Or are we really with fresh eyes approaching the team or the situation or the family person that, is in front of us? So to be a good coach, I would say the first thing is work on self. Unless we're not aware of our own backstory, our own beliefs, there is really little progress we can make, with your coachee. I'm saying coachee in terms of whether it's your child or your team. And, at home, it's like a leadership lab in progress, because at work, like you said, we still wear these masks. We still have that professionalism or that a little restraint which we have. But at home, we are like our raw, unmasked selves, you know. And so, these triggers which happen, these conversations we have with our kids, they're such beautiful indicators. The minute I say something to my 25-year-old, her expression changes. It gives me an understanding that something I've said is needs, to be thought about. So curiosity, why do I do what I do? And empathy, definitely seeing the other person's point of view. And I would say even knowing when to set the boundary, knowing when one has to say that is it. These are some things which are immediately coming to my mind.
It's all about working on ourselves, whether you're a leader at work or parent at home, right? So, and which is the most difficult part, right? Building the coaching mindset purely in the coaching context or leadership development context is also the most difficult part of the journey. First of all, how many of us, the training coaches or leaders are willing to accept that I need to work on myself? I get so many of our clients saying that, can you talk to my son, daughter, spouse? They need help, right? I always say, a standard reply, no, let us work with you. Let us finish this. Most probably they won't need help, right? Help. So to that extent, it's that acceptance, which is what we also try to do it with our leaders whom we work with, especially these people who have come with some success and some position and that ego, the good ego. Not easy, right? Not easy to accept that I still need to work uh, on myself. So leadership was always about working on ourselves. Just to add to what also came up when Prerna was speaking is, as leaders, we all are chasing some level of legacy. Whether we are able to articulate what is that legacy, whether we have defined consciously, unconsciously, if we are leading, there is some legacy that we are chasing knowingly, unknowingly. And I feel the biggest legacy that we leave behind and the most important impact we leave behind is as a parent. If I fumble as a parent, if I am failure as a parent, I would have conquered the world. There's no use, right? So that's why it's important that we balance these two very well, because there's a lot of commonality now, especially now Gen Z's are younger than our kids now, right? Who are joining the workforce. So all the more need to be receptive to their expectations, their values, their needs and purpose. Yeah. So legacy, I just also wanted to bring in that point, Supriya. Yeah.
I think legacy hit home. We've got lots of emojis popping up on screen when you talked about that, right? Your legacy as a parent. And interestingly, when we run programs for leaders, we're using the same tools that I learned in parenting, right? Whether it is active listening or nonviolent communication, recognizing your own beliefs, recognizing your own voices of judgment, cynicism, fear. All of that comes through. But what is coming through is that if leadership has to be a way of life, because you can't put on a leader hat and take it off. It has to be with you all the time for it to become an unconscious competence. Then understanding how to coach our children and build coaching as a leadership mindset is really critical, right? So that having a coaching mindset and a way of interacting also becomes a way of life.
Yeah, just listening to Subash, what was coming in my mind is that, at Parenting Matters, we run these courses. And more often than not, parents come saying, something's wrong with my child. You have to help me sort it out and this and that. And, we tell them, sure, see, one time thing, why don't you just join a course and it'll take you through some, concepts which you can try and tell us what happens. Because, it's an experiment, it's a new way of being. You're not going to replicate what was done, but you're also now going to make something which will be applicable to your child and your unique blueprint. And after the course, 99% of the parents say, it was not my child, it was me that needs changing. So, and I just wanted to add to what Subash was saying about legacy. Actually, legacy in parenting is a bit scary because generations have spoken about, I couldn't become a doctor, so I want to make my child a doctor, or I'm a doctor or I'm an engineer, so my child has to be, because a legacy has to carry on. And really, what is success in parenting? If one has to question, is success in parenting my child being in IIT and getting a job which is like some six figures? Is success in parenting that my child is happy? Is success in parenting that my child is happy to come home as an adult and tell me about their day? What is success in parenting? So each one of us has to decide. And I think so is the case for leadership. So many people are focused on when I'm gone, people should remember me. But what about now? What's happening now in the relationships? So those were some of the thoughts which I was.
We say that you remember your worst teacher or your best teacher, right? You don't remember the in between ones. You remember the ones who evoke huge emotions in you. And in multiple generations who are, and actually what the difference is this younger generation has come into their own a lot more than we ever were. They are more aware, which is what you all started by saying. And therefore, we need to work together as though we're different cogs on the same wheel, not like it's not hierarchy anymore.
I like the way you linked, the three elements, right? The mindset and then parenting and how it turn up.
Okay. Is it the unconscious practices at home that shape the conscious personality we want to bring at work? Okay. So what is becomes an unconscious competence at home? Does that make us a mindful leader? Right? Prerna?
I would, short answer is yes, because just so many things are absorbed just by watching and being in the space. And that's why, Supriya, I like the way you said, coaching and the way you show up, whether it's at work or at home, it has to be a way of life. Because it's not only the spoken and the said and the done, but it's just the being and the, you know, which kind of gets absorbed so much. So, yes, for sure. Subhash, what's your take on that?
I fully agree. It's the unconscious practices that shape. So a lot starts at home, especially when we are young, right? That 5 to 10 years is the maximum impression made. Yeah, I can't agree more. Huge responsibility on young parents. Yeah.
In fact, we've been working with some parents in the corporation school in North Chennai. So these are very under-resourced areas, and these are parents who have faced so many difficulties. We don't need to elaborate, like in slums and stuff. So when we do courses for them, one of the first sessions we did, a mother came up to me and said, "I can say I love you to my child. I didn't know I can hug my child." And it just opened my eyes to, if you haven't received it, if you haven't seen that as a role, like I'm sure that her mother didn't do that, didn't love or express love to her. So she feels the template is not to do that with her child. So that, you know, these things just pass on like that.
And we see it at work. There are some people in a team who will be posturing, right? Who feel the need to show off, not showcase, show off, right? And those are ones who needed to do that to get noticed at home. Sumi has said, I think collaboration and co-creation is very important in parenting and leadership. I use this myself in writing coaching. But in a practical sense, how easy or hard is this to implement as a parent or as a leader at work? Okay, I'm going to respond to that one because I think that as a parent and as a leader, um, it is very difficult when you are triggered, right? And we are triggered. And the day we acknowledge that we are triggered, and the day we spend time, and it's difficult, and effort to go into that zone of self awareness, then we are able to handle this in a far more practical manner. I think that's where coaching comes in. You know, recently we had a conversation with somebody from IIT Madras, and they were talking about how when they bring in the younger generation and mix with the older generation, and in IIT Madras, there's a huge difference. They said we assign coaches and mentors because you need somebody to help you walk through the noise in your head and kind of clarify and see what is really important and what is not. So, from a practical sense, it's never easy. It's always a bit hard. It becomes easy the more we kind of that, which is why we're saying it has to be a way of life, right? If I have a team leader at a young level, that's like the teenager at home, right? I have to stay connected. I have to understand what they want, what they're looking for, why they're doing this job in the first place, recognize motivation levels, be very clear about boundaries and what freedom is allowed and what freedom is not allowed. It's really the same, you know, in terms of you just have to translate that to the workspace. And interestingly, some of us do it better at work, some of us do it better at home, right? How does our attachment to legacy affect our effectiveness?
It is very straightforward. I always quote Viktor Frankl in my work. If you chase happiness, happiness will go away from you. That's something like that. He quotes a German philosopher. So, if you're chasing legacy, I think either in parenting or in at work, I don't think that will give us peace of mind in the first place, and whether we are able to manifest that legacy that we dream of. But the thing is, we can't escape that factor. The thing is, Khalil Gibran, I think, says, right? The children have just come through us. Something like that he says, right? I mean, we don't own them. So, where is the question of controlling them? And, Supriya, as pet parents, we don't control our respective dogs. So, how do we? I mean, that is a space. So, you know, uh, understanding that you're still building legacy as a parent and as a leader, especially, both Supriya and me, we all three of us are here founder partners of our respective business. So there is no running away from it. At the same time, it can't become my legacy and my attachment to that legacy. And do I always live by that? No, I am still obsessed with some of those business parameters, some things at home. But at least, we're just little more aware that ultimately it's not about us. Whether it's parenting, it's about children. Whether at work, it's about the larger community or system that we are creating.
You know, this brings us to why we had this conversation in the first place, right? If, as a parent, you are willing to show curiosity and compassion and the courage to listen to other people's opinions, then it is far easier for you to do that at work. If, as a youngster, you have been introduced on how to do this because you had a parent coach, then your ability to do it as a leader is enhanced, right? So building the ability to be a coach, and Subash, I'm going back to what you taught us, right? And I think Prerna said something to this effect a few days ago in our conversation. Coaching is about believing the answer doesn't lie in you, the answer lies in somebody else, right? And it is also about being present to what is emerging. How do we leave our judgments and beliefs aside and come back to what is emerging? And that is really why multi-generational leadership is such a hot topic right now, because we don't have the time to be present for ourselves, let alone each other. And between social media and everything else, and on one hand everybody's talking about slow eating and slow living and all of this, but the fact is that time is getting shorter and shorter. And I think we really have to take that time to be present, and see what is emerging for everybody, for ourselves and for each other, for leadership and parenting and coaching to be a way of life. I think that's a good space to wind up. Thank you so much, Subash and Prerna. We could sit forever and have this conversation. So we
There's just
just
so much to chew on. I'd like to first thank you. Lovely questions. And I love the way the conversations unfolded. And I'm left with this thought that the person who shows up at work or the person who shows up at home is not two different people. And this intertwining of way of life, the way we are in one space, helps us show up in the another space with mindfulness, with um, just that. I'm just taking that away, and thank you for
I'll
this.
build on that, Prerna. Thank you for that lead. We are holding on to a lot of things and making life complicated at work for sure. At home, as Supriya said earlier, we are still a little more relaxed. But it's better to let go, just relax, and then create a co-creating workspace, collaborative workspace. It is fun, because ultimately everyone should enjoy also the process. Yeah, so we can create it a lot more easier than we think of. So give it a try. The coaching mindset and
Yeah.
coaching way of life.